So I had an interesting experience this week. But to understand why it's interesting, I need to back up a little bit. So just last week, our family here in Houston and our family across the United States commemorated the 2-year anniversary since the death of my older brother, Richard. And here's the experience I had. My brother and sister-in-law were part of a very large church in Raleigh and had been for a long time at one of their satellite campuses. And Richard had always been involved in the church there at a really high level. So he started working sort of in the AV area as an audio tech. But because this was one of their satellite campuses, they set up and worshiped in a school every Sunday. So he would get there about 5 o'clock in the morning with the band and other people because they had to unload everything and do all of the wires and run everything, and they had multiple gatherings on Sunday. And so his day went from about 5 in the morning at church to about 2. And over time, his wife, Stephanie, got really tired of not seeing him on Sunday, so he stepped into a different capacity as a greeter at the church. Just a lot short of time, not all day, not as labor intensive. And so he was faithful to that for several years as he was there. And so after Richard died, because he had served the church so faithfully, the community created an award in his name and in his honor to give to what they consider like their best volunteer for the year. But then something happened this week. For years and years, they had been pooling their money, saving it all up, so that they could finally build their own church building. And this last week, they broke ground on the church building where that campus will worship. And they asked my sister-in-law, Stephanie, to come the day that they were breaking ground to put Richard's ashes at the entrance of the church. Here's a picture of it. And I know that if you've been around Ecclesia for the last, say, 2 years, if you were to say, Sean, we are really getting tired of hearing about your dead brother, I totally get it, 1, and 2, I'm not gonna stop. Because when something like this happens, it raises this question in me about what do you want people to say about you when you are dead? How do you want people to commemorate who you were? Because the reality is, like, I know a lot about my brother that his church doesn't know, and he knew a lot about me that you all don't know, just the good and the bad, the beautiful and the terrible. But in the final weighing of your life, what would you like to be remembered for? Rochelle and I went to this wedding reception several years ago, and people got up to talk about the bride and the groom and special things about their life. And one of the friends of the bride stood up for a very long time. You guys need to keep those things to about 2 minutes. And she talked about what a great dancer she was. And there's nothing wrong with being good at those kinds of things. But as we drove home that night, I had this question stirring, like, do I want to be remembered for my work? And I want all of us, and think all of us, should be dedicated to the work that God calls us to, and we should do our very best at it at any given time in our life. But what will your obituary sound like? And David Brooks has this dichotomy of life, and he says, like, we spend so much of our time worried about resume virtues instead of obituary virtues. Like the things that people will talk about once we are gone. And so if you've been around Ecclesia over the summer, You know that we're in a series called Faithful and Brave, where we're looking at these incredible heroes of the faith from Hebrews 11. And these were women and men who in their time, in their own place, had to walk the tension of being faithful to who God called them to be, and that the reality is that there is a God in the world. But also, they were called to be brave, to step into new territory and to do new things. And for that reason, long after they're dead, we still talk about their faith. And what I want to talk about today is one who has that long shadow of what people talk about after they're dead, and it's Noah. This is what Hebrews 11 says about Noah. By faith, Noah respected God's warning regarding the flood, the likes of which no one had ever seen, and built an ark that saved his family. And in this he condemned the world and inherited the righteousness that comes by faith. So, if you have been around the church for a while, if you've been around the Bible for a while, you probably know the story of Noah. When I was a kid, maybe like some of you in VBS, Noah and Noah's Ark was the most popular story in VBS ever. And people just love Noah's Ark, and people are having babies. They get Noah's Ark themed nursery stuff for them. They have Noah's Ark toys, Noah's Ark pajamas. And I know why. Because Noah's Ark is the story that every young parent wants to instill in their children because it's simple: obey or die. Like, this is what we want out of our children. But just in case it's been a while since you read Genesis, this is part of the fuller story. Here's the account of Noah and his descendants. Noah was a good man, a right living man, the best man of his generation. And he walked closely with God. Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They lived at a time when the world had become vile and corrupt. Violence was everywhere. God saw that the earth was in ruins, and he knew why. All people on earth, except Noah, had lived corrupt lives and ruined God's plans for them. He had to do something. Eternal One says to Noah, Noah, I have decided to wipe out all the living creatures I have made because they are spreading violence throughout the earth. Watch. I will destroy them with the earth. And I want you to build an ark. Build it out of cypress wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with tar. Here's how you will do it. Build the ark 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Put a roof on the ark and leave a gap of 18 inches below the roof line for air to circulate. Put the door of the ark on its side and build it with lower, middle, and upper decks. Look, I'm going to unleash a torrent and flood the earth to destroy all flesh under the heavens, which breathes the breath of life. Everything that is on earth will die. Noah did everything the Eternal One asked him to do. But I will make a pact with you, Noah, a covenant agreement. To survive, you and your family, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives must go into the ark. And out of all the living creatures I have made, you must bring 2 of each kind into the ark with you. To keep them alive, bring 1 male and 1 female of each kind. Bring all kinds of birds, all sorts of animals, and all varieties of creatures that creep on the ground in pairs, so that each species will survive. Also, you must bring food with you. Bring every kind of food that may be eaten and store it all inside the ark. That way, you and all the creatures will have enough food to eat. So Noah listened to God, and he built the ark. He did everything God asked him to do. Now, when you hear that story, you're clearly thinking, this is how I want to decorate my children's bedroom. And when I first was taught this story, it was all about those specifics. about how to build the walls and how big it should be. The church that nurtured and taught me was really concerned that I paid attention to the specificity of which Noah built the ark, because what they wanted to do is they wanted to ingrain in me that when God tells you to do something, like you need to take care of it and to do it like God tells you to do it. And in our VBSs, we had lots of discussions about that kind of specificity. And my faith was just to respond to the specificity of God. But then there was this other side, that when they taught this story, they would have all of these characters who were making fun of Noah as he built the ark and mocking Noah and mocking his faith. And they were really worried about the specificity of how to build the ark, but all that other stuff about Noah being mocked, that's not anywhere in the story. That's just not there. But the part of the story that stands out to me now is that God tells Noah to build an ark, and Noah just does it. And then this happens in the story. The Eternal One says, "It's time. Go into the ark now. Take your entire household with you, because I see that you are the only one in this generation who lives right before me. Take the animals with you. Take 7 pairs of all ritually acceptable animals, both the male and female, and take 1 pair of any animal that isn't acceptable, both the male and the female. And take 7 pairs of the birds of the sky too, also male and female, so that we can keep each kind alive on the earth. 7 days from now, I will send a massive rain to cover the earth. The rain will last 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing I have made will be wiped off the face of the earth." Noah did everything the Eternal One asked him to do. So God comes and tells Noah to build an ark. And in the next scene, God tells Noah, "Go into the ark." That's it. So let me ask you a question. It's a question I never thought to ask when I was in VBS. How long does it take to build an ark? God speaks to Noah, tells Noah to build an ark, and Noah doesn't hear from him again until it's time to go into the ark. And that's it. And the only help that Noah has to build this ark are his 3 sons. Like, how long would that take? Let me tell you, I started on a Lego Millennium Falcon last year. So scholars would say that it would take between 55 and 75, maybe even up to 100 years to build the ark to the specification with 4 people working that God asked for. And how many times in that 55, 75, 100 years did Noah just think that he was going crazy? That maybe he just heard a voice one day. That he got this and he started it, but he's not getting any help, all the frustration. Maybe Noah thought, well, maybe it's just me that thinks the world is wicked, and I'm hoping that there'll be a flood. Like years and years and years of believing you've heard from God, only to never hear back from God. And the older I get, the less I think Noah's faithfulness isn't about a God with a strange command, but faithfulness to a God who just doesn't keep repeating the same commands. And what makes Noah faithful and what makes him brave is not the bravery of facing a flood, is that Noah remained faithful and steadfast in a long silence from God. when no one's encouraging you to be faithful, when you're not getting high fives and pats on the back for being faithful. There's no dinner in your honor, no partner to look across the table and thank you for your faithfulness. You get nothing. Eugene Peterson calls this a long obedience in the same direction. And this is what he writes. He says, the long obedience in the same direction means patiently setting your heart on the true goal that has been given you and steadily moving toward it. Even when it looks as if nothing is happening, it means sticking with Jesus, regardless of how you feel, regardless of what circumstances are raging around you, because the kingdom has already been inaugurated and you belong to it. Even if you do not yet see it fully, this is the triune God's pattern for our growth, and it is slow, often difficult path. But it is the way of faithful perseverance, trusting that God is shaping you over time, even when the process seems invisible or the progress uncertain. And so, Ecclesia, this is what I want you to know. Most of what you want most, not what you want now, but what you want most, requires a long obedience in the same direction. You can write this down. What lasts forever takes forever. Like, you want a beautiful and sacred marriage. Whether you're married now or you're seeking a partner, that requires a long obedience in the same direction. You will get sidetracked, you'll get sidelined. And nearly every week in this community, I talk to a young woman who was so desirous to have a partner that what they tell me is that they gave away parts of themselves that they never thought they would give away in the hopes that there was something coming, and find themselves abused and abandoned. A long obedience in the same direction. Raising your children, like, you can manipulate and cajole. You could force compliance. You can say, because I said so. There are a million other ways to exert and force control over people, only to one day have children who don't want to see you, and you are the main topic as they sit on their therapist's couch. It's a long obedience in the same direction. Or for some of us, we have kids who are struggling with their health or their mental health or a season of life, and we feel like through their pains or addictions or whatever it is, that we have done everything that we can do, and we don't know if we can go on any longer or when is all of this going to stop. But if you want something the most instead of something now, it's a long obedience in the same direction. And you already know this because you've had enough life when you didn't want to study and you didn't want to exercise or you didn't want to apply yourself, you didn't want to eat right, and now you are just swimming in the soup of all of your decisions because you took a shorter exit than the long obedience. And all of us want this executive order approach to life where we just make it happen today because we've got these levers of control to pull on. But in the end, that's only as good as the next administration. It's short-lived. The power in Noah's story is not that he listened to God, but that God only had to tell Noah once in order for Noah to listen to God. And in your soul, the eternity that is written in your soul, you know that there are things that God has told you, and you are praying and hoping and wishing that God would come back around and tell you again, so that maybe you can use God's silence as an excuse to not do God's will. But you already know. And silence can become our escape hatch for not doing the good that we know to do, that we've already been told to do. And God's not the only one that's silent in this story. Noah is silent. Through the whole story, through Noah's whole story, up through this point, Noah doesn't say a word. Nothing. And Genesis just says that Noah did everything that God commanded him to do without saying anything. But here's the twist. Despite the fact that in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, there are 613 commands, there is no Hebrew word for obey. So he doesn't make one up. It's the word shema, which means to listen, to render, to understand, to respond. In those VBS classes, I learned that what I should take away from Noah's story is to obey God, but there's no Hebrew word for obey. What God is asking Noah to do is not to obey, but to trust. And you have been around long enough and know enough people to realize there is a difference between obeying and trusting. You do what your boss asks you to do, that's obey, but that doesn't mean you trust her. Noah is faithful because he trusted that God would be faithful. Over the years, in the silence, that God has said this, and God can be trusted. And so the invitation from God in the middle of whatever it is that you're in the middle of now, it's not to obey, but it's trust. And I would bet whatever it is that you are finding difficult to trust God with today, He's already told you about that. Let me pray for you. God, give us a deep trust in your goodness and your love, that we will keep putting one foot in front of the other as we walk into your future, knowing that you will meet us there and be faithful as you have always been faithful. And we ask it in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.